Good morning. I am Aldred Rodriguez, a Bicolano, and today we will locate the syncretic elements of the Peñafrancia devotion and argue its value as an important building block in the Bicolano identity, the formation of their socio-civic engagement, and everyday meaning-making. The presentation is divided into three sub-themes. First, we will discuss the form and material. Second, we will proceed with the Bicolano devotion, and finally, the Peñafrancia as a modern festival. Before we dig deeper, allow me to narrate the origins of this modern devotion in the Philippines. A Spanish seminarian, in the person of Miguel Robles de Covarrubias, fell into serious illness when he was a student at the University of Santo Tomas, Manila. Miguel prayed to the Virgin of Peña de Francia and promised, if healed, would construct a chapel on the banks of the Pasig River. Upon ordination to the priesthood, Miguel Covarrubias built his promise not on the Pasig River, but in the Ciudad de Nueva Cáceres, now the city of Naga, in Bicol. The chapel hosts an image patterned after the Our Lady of Peña de Francia in Spain that Miguel carried with him. In comparison to Spain and its other colonies, the cult of the Virgin Mary blossomed more in the Philippines during the colonial era and even more after the Spanish-Filipino Wars. My first point is romantically titled Wood and Blood. The image currently enshrined on Calle Balatas is approximately 275 years old. This Madonna, carved by an indigenous artist who was probably a member of the Aita ethnic group, does not have the usual trimmings of a European Madonna: alabaster skin, tall, and with a full child. Instead, the Our Lady of Peñafrancia, standing at 4 feet, including her crown, is rather small compared to other Marian images. The child is not fully exposed, as with the typical Madonna. Mary herself only shows her face. The image, letter A, is made of santol wood painted with the dog's blood, which serves both as a colorant and wood preservative. The santol tree is known for its medicinal properties and as food. Its wood, when cut, bleed a white goo which turns red when congealed. Cimarrones, the local inhabitants, used dogs in hunting, which is vital for their sustenance. According to Foxtale, the dog's carcass was dumped into the Bicol River, and as soon as the carcass hit the water, it unexpectedly began to swim, and presumably hundreds of people witnessed this event. The resurrection of the dog has animistic background rather than in Abrahamic traditions. Throughout the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, and the Roman Catholic version, resurrections, or its theological term, anastasis, have been reserved for humans. Pre-colonial Southeast Asia, however, believes water has a healing properties. Further, this new perspective on the role of Our Lady of Peñafrancia as a miraculous healer has replaced the old anitos, specifically the water gods. Some authors have even argued that the cult of the Virgin Mary in the Philippines is a distant memory of the pre-colonial goddesses and priestesses, notably the goddess Tubigan. Even the present fluvial procession has an element of water, not only as a medium for transport, but also for religious and physical healing. Though her Madonna aspect, the one that makes her Ina ng Bicolan, or Mother of Bicolandia, the child she carries is invisible to the naked eye. The attribution of Mary as Ina ng Bicolan or Patrona ng Bicol is fundamentally Bicolano in the sense that this adaptation does not exist anywhere. The question of Christian identity as observed through Bicolano devotion to the Peñafrancia is a product of semiotic transformation of meaning into practice. Its allusion to the transcendental subject or thingamification is evident in the events of Bicol Fiesta. The image, an observable signifier, is associated with religious meaning and provides physical form of belongingness to the Bicolanos. This can be also seen across the Philippines, where the representation of Mary shows the subject's centrality in the community. The physical object is utilized to fit the religious needs of the community, for example, the Dolorosa or the Suffering Mother. To a church in which Mary is the first fruit and the eschatological fulfillment, this object-subject relationship critically evaluates and appropriates Marian theology from within the tradition and the Marian devotion as the personification, the apex, and the purest form of Bicolano devotion. Allow me to proceed with the second theme, the Bicolano devotion. We have to remember that the initial colonial conquest of the Philippines depended on a religious social policy and the harmonious relationship of the Catholic Church with the indigenous community, and not on Spain's military might. The indigenous community, particularly the cimarrones and the remontados, responded with opposition to the foreign government, but welcomed the religious aspect of the colonization. The introduction of colonial era fiestas, which were purposely grand and full of splendor, created an image of a generous church that outshines the already extravagant and colorful pre-colonial Southeast Asian festival culture and costumes. The traslacion and the fluvial processions are the highlights of the 9-day novenario at the Cathedral of St. John in Naga City. This is continued with a solemn feast at the Basilica of Peñafrancia. Certainly, the devotion practiced during the time of Fray Miguel de Covarrubias has changed, as seen in the evolution of the Andas. The Peñafrancia Festival, however, remains a celebration of faith, an expression of confidence, tenderness, and gratitude of a people towards an enchanting mother. During the festival, the piety of the Bicolanos is seen in the music, dance, even in the objectification of tradition. During the traslacion or the transfer of Our Lady of Peñafrancia from her shrine in Calle Balatas to the Metropolitan Cathedral, devotees shout Viva la Virgen. Some devotees walk the entire Peñafrancia Avenue on bare feet. This does not hamper their procession even with drunk crowds throwing broken glasses which causes harm to those walking barefoot. It is a common sight to see red spots on the road. River processions are of course not unique to the celebration of Peñafrancia. Rivers, tributaries, seas, and other water formations play distinct roles across different contexts and levels in Southeast Asia. Other examples are the water processions of the Lady of Salumbao in Obando, Bulacan. Another example is the Fiesta of San Juan in Metro Manila, where people recreate the baptism of Christ. Further, this affinity to water is likened to the olden animistic practices of the inhabitants linking fertility, good health, and purity to water, which is a common theme in Southeast Asia. Other animist tradition includes the invocation to the king of the sea, Raha de Laot. The name Naga in Bicol and Cebu, Philippines have obvious similarities to their namesake, the giant water snake in the Indian cosmology, while Rato Lara Kidul, the goddess of the South Sea of the Javanese cosmology, is multifaceted, complex being. The example shows us that modern Christianity has no monolithic language or expression. Christianity merges the areas of faith and reason, material and transcendence, object and subject, such as water and devotion, and a replica of Our Lady of Peñafrancia as object and Mary as subject. The transfer of meaning into rituals and traditions develop a syncretic form of Christianity. The varied representation of Mary in the Philippines shows the subject's centrality in the Filipino society and its object utilized to fit the religious needs of the community. For example, the Dolorosa or the Suffering Mother, as Mary who brought forth he who was God, or he who was born of Mary was God, by the Council of Ephesus, and for Jewish refugees in the Philippines, the Black Madonna, a symbol of power and protest. This object-subject relationship critically evaluates and appropriates the Marian theology from within tradition. However, with its long history, this devotion even breached the secular. The ritual of pagmamanto involves the wrapping of a sick person's body with the manto and ina to imitate a mother's embrace. This presumably provides physical and spiritual reprieve. I have personally experienced this ritual and seen it repeatedly performed. I cannot, however, in good conscience attest to any physical or spiritual gains from the practice. What is important, at least for this presentation, is that my elders believe in the practice. My final theme for this morning deals with the contemporary form and the Bicolano social and civic engagement. Like Christmas, Ash Wednesday, Easter Sunday, the Peñafrancia is rooted in the trading and other seasonal activities of the region. As a modern festival, the Peñafrancia promotes the growth of the secular communities in the region. It is also a dynamic celebration of faith and human mobility. From its Iberian origin, the devotion traveled to Asia, and from Asia is now practiced in the open waters of Roxham Broads, United Kingdom, in the rivers of Milan, Italy, the Nepean River in Australia, and in the Archdiocese of Washington. In its modern form across the world, one would wait for long hours just to touch and kiss the image's manto. This brief moment of interaction is something the Catholic Bicolanos perform in hopes of healing or other personal reasons. The practicality, particularly in the recent pandemic and the changes in community beliefs, however, have tested the historical and cultural elements of the festival and its importance to the Bicolanos. The Peñafrancia Festival is also an organized socio-spatial phenomenon that is taking at a designated time outside the everyday mundane routine, increasing the overall volume of social capital and celebrating selecting elements of tangible and intangible culture. The Peñafrancia integrates the small towns spread over the Bicol Peninsula into a larger community by integrating several aspects of modern festival. Civilizational, economic, and advances in technology have paved way for the rise of this modern festival. The access of individuals to disposable income means more resources are allocated to leisure, entertainment, and other higher order needs. One of these needs is desire to experience new culture, both as a factor of entertainment and as a form of experience. The local government leverages the popularity of the Peñafrancia to attract tourists from the Philippines and from the rest of the world. Naga City, its food, beliefs, and the modern Peñafrancia Festival attracts millions of tourists. The Bishop Francisco Goenza Trade Fair, started in 2010, organized by the local trade association, is one such an example in which the festival has taken an economic aspect. Information spread through digitization also increased the information available to tourists, logistical or otherwise, and other and brings people closer to economic and cultural interactions. Tragedies as bad omens. Three examples: the Colgante Bridge incident of September 16, 1972, the theft of the image on August 15, 1981, and the Pagoda incident of 1987. These are deeply entrenched in the Filipino psyche that it has shaped the political culture. Some Bicolanos attribute the bridge incident, the Pagoda incident, and the theft of the image as bad omens for the Bicolanos, notably the continued armed conflict between the New People's Army and the Philippine Armed Forces during the 1970s-1980s. The political instability, social polarization, and the persistent armed insurgency as under the President Corazon Aquino have transformed the Bicolano into the Bicol region into a combat zone. As an observer and an insider, allow me to offer this conclusion. It is evident that the relationship between devotion and devotee has become inseparable due to the process of colonization and Catholization. It is the product of a semiotic transformation, a form of belongingness to the Bicolanos, and an enduring legacy which will continue for years to come. Thank you. Or, in my native tongue, Diyos mabalos.